welcome to my spoiler-free review of Sons of Darkness by Gourav Mohanty. This is an Indian epic fantasy that draws its influences from George R.R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire, as well as the Indian epic Sanskrit Mahabharata. And in the author's note, Gourav Mohanty talks about his inspiration after reading A Game of Thrones, and you definitely see that influence. When you open the book, not only do you get a map, but you also get a huge cast of characters that are divided by territory, by house, and sigil. And you also get words for each territory. So you get words such as deeds, not birth, we do not bow, law above all, so on and so forth, kind of reminiscent of winter is coming. And I think that these words can maybe hint at some themes to come. This is definitely what I would consider epic fantasy, because not only do you have a huge cast of characters and all these different territories, you have lots of political intrigue, you have a caste system drawing upon Indian influence, as well as magic based on Indian influence with chakras and mandalas and devas. And you also have prophecies, you have a pirate, a female pirate captain. You have these female warriors, by the way, which are called silver wolves, I'll talk about a little bit later. And you also have some master manipulators, a torturer that's very reminiscent of Glokta from the First Law trilogy. And you also have an apprenticeship with a young person and a very unlikely mentor. So many interesting, unique aspects to this story. And I'm sure I will leave some off the list because there are so many, but there is dark humor, there is sex, it is considered grimdark, and I think I'll talk about that more when I get into the themes, which are quite dark. So in this book, I would say that as for the reading experience, now I did learn about this book through Petrick's review, which was fantastic. And I think Petrick is right on about the fact that the prologue to this book is fantastic and does some wonderful foreshadowing for what's to come. And also about what he said about it being kind of a slow build until the second half, and then things really amplify. And that was definitely my experience, especially with two huge events that happened towards the end of the book. But I will say that the slow build for me was partly because of my lack of familiarity with a lot of the terminology he introduced. Now, some of this terminology might have been just world building, and then some of it might have been just directly from the Mahabharata. And that is where I think the reading experience will vastly differ depending on the person's background. So I personally was not familiar with the Mahabharata before reading this. I am a little more familiar with that now than I was before, but I think that for those who are familiar with that epic, then this will be very familiar to you. I did watch a video overview of the Mahabharata when I was about halfway through the book, and suddenly things started to fall into place, and it even slightly spoiled me for one thing to happen in the second half. That said, it's definitely its own thing. I think this is definitely unique, and anybody familiar with the Mahabharata will tell you that. But I do think that that's worth noting. And by the way, I was familiar with one character, Krishna, and there is definitely a very different spin on that character than what I was familiar with that character, and I thought it was fascinating personally. And as for the reading experience, again, I think there were some things that Gourav Mohanty did that did help me orient myself in the story. So one of those things is that the way he introduced characters I thought was very strategic. He divides this book into several parts, and in each part he gives you two different perspectives, alternating the different perspectives per chapter. And then the next section, you get two different perspectives, alternating per chapter, so on and so forth. And then a lot of them intersect towards the end with this tournament. And so I thought that was a very strategic way of sort of sequencing the introduction of characters, especially because a ton of those primary characters also have a lot of secondary characters associated with them. And I think another strength with that is that each of the character introductions I thought was done in a very memorable way. So when I stepped away from the book, I felt like I could think back on characters and they left an impression on me. I felt like I had a good grasp of who these characters were. Plus, there are a lot of strong female characters, as I mentioned. So in addition to this pirate character, there's also these women called the Silver Wolves. And so the silver wolves, it's explained here in the book that they're not really typical soldiers necessarily. They're more search and rescue, patrolling type of military rather than those who are active on the battlefield, but they do know how to use a weapon. And I got the impression it is not easy to become a silver wolf and that there's rigorous training involved. And a lot of these women were women that were discarded in youth. So they have to kind of like burn away their past and commit wholeheartedly to the path of being a silver wolf. So these are very hardened women. And I got the impression that it's not very easy to be a woman in this world. Now, there was conversation that women are treated differently depending on where you are in the world. So women in the North are treated differently than women in the South. And so I'm curious to see how that gets explored later on. But in general, that actually leads into one of the main themes in this story. As I mentioned, this is considered grim dark. And one of the biggest themes that I saw in this book was pain. And what I really appreciated about the approach to theme in this book was that you don't get just one perspective of pain. You didn't just see it through the silver wolves. You saw it through multiple characters in different areas of the caste system even. And so I really appreciated that approach to theme, but pain being the great motivator, pain being the forager. So it seemed like pain shaped the identity of a lot of different people, but in different ways. But it definitely was not a very hopeful way. So I think it did slant a lot towards vengeance, for example, or revolution, or, just trying to take down an enemy. And so through that pain, you are sacrificing your past, you're sacrificing hope for the future. And I think that I also got the impression that honor is not congruent with pain. So I felt like a lot of these people who commit to pain, they also explore dishonor. That's also kind of explored in the story through conversation. And so I thought that was interesting. In addition to pain, I think that we also got some conversations on the illusion of peace when people are silencing themselves or being oppressed, to have this sort of illusion of peace. So I think that was something else explored in this book. But yeah, it is a very dark and bleak book for sure. It is written in a very modern style. So I think that's another thing to keep in mind. I think this will greatly appeal to modern grimdark fantasy readers. I think it was very accessible personally. Now, as for minor criticisms, I did mention I think that a glossary would have been helpful. But in addition to that, I think definitely there could have been a little bit of polishing in the editing and formatting of this book. But that said, it is gorgeous. This is now one of the most gorgeous books I own. It was very kindly gifted to me from the author who reached out to me after I saw Pedrick's review. The timing just worked out that way. And I felt like I was a target audience, and I still think I was, even though, like I said, I had to learn a lot about Indian culture, and I'm happy to do so. I'm happy to continue learning because I think this is fascinating. It was such a fresh take on epic fantasy. And in addition to that, I think this will greatly appeal to people who want great political intrigue, who want an interesting, diverse cast of characters, who want to explore some of those darker themes, and who want some really interesting plot twists and reveals. I just thought it was fascinating. There were some really cool warfare tactics employed in the battle scene. So this definitely got me thinking as well. When I stepped away from it, even a couple weeks later, I'm still thinking about it. And I think that's a sign that this book left an impression on me, that I enjoyed my experience. And I hope more people will pick it up and enjoy it, because I think there was so much here explored. I think, by the way, the end came together in a satisfying way, while at the same time leaving room for a lot of excitement to come in future books. So that was my experience of Sons of Darkness, and I'm so excited because I will be discussing this book here on my channel with the author, Gourav Mohanty, as well as Philip Chase, and with Angie the Bookaholic and Anita Gata, and I'm so excited to have that discussion. Everybody in that discussion will have much more familiarity with Indian culture than me, but I am excited to learn more, and I hope you join us. So again, thank you so much for watching. Let me know in the comment section below if you plan to pick this up, and have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.